suggests that in the primordial, there was no order.
Well, that's the defining characteristic of it, is that order has not been applied. It's primordial. It's that stage incipient. It's about to be given order, but it's the cosmic progenitors, the cosmocrators, who, through that cosmic ideation, through intelligence and will, they give it order.
Is cosmic ideation intelligence?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we call it intelligence in the human kingdom, but it is derived directly from the intelligence of the universe. Right? From Mahat comes Manas. Yeah.
But primordial also means undifferentiated. And that is why we cannot apply order or anything to it.
Right.
The differentiation process that indicates that Manvantara has started has not begun yet.
Right.
It's previous to it.
Right. The beginning of the Manvantara and the manifestation of order are coeval processes. One defines the other. It is sort of synonymous in that sense.
But by the same token, all that light indicates when the logoid impulse will start is present in it.
Indeed.
But it's not defined.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that it seems so simple? We're talking about the cell and all of these four items in the cell and the alphabet, etc. We have all these differences that occur. It's so basic that, hey, it all comes from the same source. We're talking the basics of Theosophy and in religions of the world, universal brotherhood. Yet it seems like we're continuing to struggle, paying great attention to these differences, and very little, it seems, attention to the concept of universal brotherhood. Everybody has a different idea, etc., and they're all competing rather than trying to work in unison and work together.
Right. Well, the idea here is that we're all competing, we're not working together, and yet it's a simple set of rules by which we should all be living that would, in theory, provide a very clear, direct path to universal brotherhood. Did I capture the comment or question?
Yes.
Well, right. But you have to enter into that, our nature as human beings. At this stage of our evolution, we have multiple aspects to our nature, including a higher nature and a lower nature, and it really depends on where our consciousness is rooted. The idea that we are operating from our lower nature, we will chafe against these rules. We will think that we are subject to them. Whereas if we can elevate our consciousness to act as the higher nature, we will see that we are the creator of these rules. These rules are there to liberate us creatively, and are there as a methodology by which we can actually live and grow and evolve. When we're stuck in the lower nature, it is very self-centered. I mean, it's very much about the little self and the needs of the moment, and not the larger needs of humanity and its progress of evolution and service to others, that whole thing. Does that address your question?
Yes, it seems that a few teachings accepted, which is the wisdom of the ages, Theosophy. We are all focused on what you're characterized, I believe, is the differences or we're sort of victims of that. We're chasing after these differences.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard, and it's difficult to find these teachings in the world today. It's kind of a comment and any follow-up comment.
Yeah, it is a world of great diversity, and in many ways that's distracting to the lower nature. we invite all these complexities, but we have to understand that it is all for a purpose. All of that happens within a system of rules as well, and that that the order provided by those laws, hence the title of the talk, Law and Order, is operating whether we are working with it, whether we are using it consciously, or whether we are being worked by it, in a sense. So it's going to all work out. In other words, I mean, law is at work in those and all those various details and all those strugglings that we engage in trying to just live our daily lives, conscious of our higher nature or not. Law is still operating there and bringing us gradually to greater and greater realization. More progress is made once that self-awareness is dawned, but the progress still happens. It's still a sustainable system. Once you remove the rules and there are discordant notes sounded, they find no harmony in other sustainable systems, so they tend to fall away. Whereas notes that are harmonious, this is a signature characteristic of the Aquarian Age, notes that are harmonious find corresponding notes elsewhere in the field of man's operation on whatever level they're being sounded, and they are sustainable. They persist. They have resonance. So yeah, please. Oh, sorry.
But there is one rule that we must all remember, and that is that at the middle of the fourth round, the monastic principle being in the ascendancy, we are not just self-conscious, but self-choosing individuals. And that makes a tremendous difference as to what our next life is going to be, because it's going to be dependent on what we are doing now. And it is specifically written in that secret doctrine of the ages that nature propels only up to that point, but beyond that it will not do so. That it is self-induced and self-devised effort that enables the individuality, the higher aspects, to come in and to slowly raise the lower, not the other way around. It's not that the lower is raising itself to the higher, it's the higher raising the lower. So if our affinity and magnetic propensity is not towards the higher, it cannot do anything for that particular personality in that life. Is this a student's understanding? I don't know how you wish to follow that.
Yeah, well, the idea that our thinking principle is the principle which we are working on now. That's what is in ascendance, and it is the pivot principle. It's that point that resides between. It's the junction, as I mentioned, between the higher nature and the lower nature, and so we can apply that intelligence at the whim of the lower nature, and thus be sort of distracted from the imperative of the higher nature, or again, because it's that pivot point, it can become the servant of the higher nature, so that the higher nature is what's actually guiding the entire system. The manas being dual, that mind principle being dual, that its duality is to be a perfect servant of the upper triad, that crowning, the kingly aspect of our nature, and to be a prince in charge of the lower nature. It operates in that space in between. So we do have a tendency to engage in a lot of thinking activity. Intellect is the order of the day. That we are manasas. That's our namesake. So it is up to us to choose who we are, what we do, where we're going, what aspects of our nature we emphasize and operate from, and it is through that process of choice that the higher nature is able to shine more clearly through the lower nature, to purify the lower nature, shine into the dark corners of the lower nature. It can only happen from the higher, as the commenter mentioned, because there really is no lower nature. It is an illusion. It is a useful illusion in this life, in this incarnation, in this world, but it won't persist like the higher nature will. So it can't really do anything on its own. It can only be left to run amok if the higher nature withdraws. So if we concentrate our energy, focus our actions as coming from the higher nature, that will naturally have a tendency to elevate and purify the lower nature. Is that consistent with your thoughts?
Mm.
Yeah.
But the personality, of course, will not contribute anything to that particular depository, if we can call it that, where it is recorded, because it can only take with it the perfected aspects in that particular life. So if the personality is totally material, selfish, not concerned about charitable events, not concerned about the welfare of anyone else, it is totally self-centered and selfish, well, what is the individuality going to take from that? It is hoped, it is stated, that at least it's a mixture of both, that some aspects we're working on will be perfected, and that the individuality can take that, like the pearls on a string, I think Kathy had said that, the silver string, and contribute to its total knowledge base.
Right.
For its next incarnation. Otherwise, it is that article called Mysteries of Afterlife, where it says that personality will drop. It's just like, and I think he compares it to, the master compares it to traveling on a train, and the personality is sleeping.
Right.
And it comes to one stop, does not perceive it, it goes into the next one. But it wakes up somewhere along the line, and then the stops become each life a span, and that you will sleep perhaps 1, 2, but that you will eventually wake up and perceive the higher aspect of yourself. So as you said, it's a process that the soul is going through, but it would be much more beneficent to itself and everyone else if it wakes up fast.
Right.
But it's not an external process,
Right.
it's an internal process.
Another analogy the students familiar with is that the personality is like a serving spoon. If you have a serving spoon and you care for it, it will be able to serve the soup. The soup is really what we're talking about. The soup is the wisdom. The soup is our lives. The spoon does not partake of the soup. The personality does not really partake of, the ancient source, the higher wisdom. It just serves it up. It's there as a tool. It's there as a useful tool to serve up the experience of this life. But it doesn't really. It can get dirty. You can not take care of it properly. It can become worn out. It has qualities that it will encounter, just as our personality does. But if the higher nature, the server, really, can take care of that instrument, then it will serve us better. There are lots of analogies. We talked last week about the horse. The horse is like our lower nature is like our horse. It's a vehicle to get us around, to allow us to move efficiently through this world, to learn from it. If we feed our horse well and we keep it, well groomed, it will serve us for a long time, faithfully, even become a sort of a willing participant in all of our activities as we bond with it. But we never let the horse take control. We never let the horse ride us. We are always the rider. We are always the charioteer, the one in control of the horse. And when we get to the banquet, we don't bring the horse with us and allow it to sit at the table with us. It has its own place. we, as a different sort of being, the higher nature is that distinct from the lower nature, has its own place at the banquet. So it's just another analogy. There
Yes,
are
but-
many. Yes, please.
But the other part of it is that substance, primordial substance, has never been created. It's also eternal.
Mm-hmm.
It's the one side of the coin. And the physical atoms of science, which are not physical, as we said, they are psycho-spiritual, nevertheless constitute everything in our visible and invisible world. Their movement is what sustains the movement of the universe. And this physical body, as elusive as it is, it's also the alchemical background where all this change is occurring, as you expressed, and that each atom eventually is going to become a self-centered individuality, because each atom in our world is going to become a human being. So it is the responsibility of the manasa to uplift everything as it goes through this experience of the soul. In other words, instead of kama manas, we're going to become buddhi manasic, where the buddhi, when yoked to manas, uplifts permanently.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what the masters have done. And her article, which is very poignant, states that we are not separate from anything in the universe, and that has to be in the background of the mind at all times. And that if one of us has done it, all of us can do it, because they're not different from us, but only in degree.
Mm-hmm.
So as we emulate to become, so we're also uplifting all this substance. So even though it is elusive, nevertheless it has its place.
Right. Well, the primordial substance is, by analogy, like the water and the snowflakes. The primordial substance is always there. There's always water in the system. It precipitates, crystallizes. It becomes this amazing diversity in manifestation of all these different snowflakes. But then at some point it melts. It re-enters the system. It becomes water again. But it's the same atoms and molecules being reused, the same snowflakes, but just a new expression. So that primordial substance, it's the same substance. You're right. It's not created anew. The water on planet Earth is not being created from some external source. What we got is what we got, and it's recycled.
On the upper levels, she calls it divine akasha, meaning that it is pure, it is brilliant, it shines, it gives. But even the dregs down here, she says, next to the earth, the astral plane next to this, it's pure, but we abuse it and make it impure. She says we give it back a lot worse than as we found it.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be mindful as to how
Right.
we even use our thought process. As thoughts are things and it is imprinted, are we uplifting or are we pushing it down? Because this becomes a very critical concept. If we are taking these elemental lives into us and they're brilliant and their intelligence with a memory of their own kind, what is it we're doing to them? Are we uplifting them to the next level, or are we pushing them back to the animalistic levels? And this also is a double-edged way of doing it, because we cannot just say purifying ourselves, changing our constitution to become more ethereal. This is the way we're doing it, by imprinting these lives.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to be very mindful.
I was curious about the relationship or significance of the age, the Aquarian age, for as the significance to man's evolution.
Well, the ages, though from one perspective they seem vast. We're talking about approximately 2,000 years. They're all a little bit different, but that's a very short time. So in the overall progress of man's evolution, there we're talking about at a minimum millions of years, but really trillions of years. So 2000, not that big a deal. It's more of an evolution of man's history, and it's about the evolution of civilization rather than man's character himself. Man and his evolution is a much larger cycle. But the evolution of civilization, it's often called the Piscean civilization and the Aquarian civilization. And prior to the Piscean was the Tauran, and prior to that was the Aryan, and prior to these are just, they have a certain character based on that astrological influence. The beauty of it is that we don't lose that progress. It's carried forth into the next age. It's just like getting up today. I did not lose everything I did yesterday, and next year I will hopefully have retained the progress I've made this year. So, but it does have a different characteristic. The Aquarian age, as we noted, is about harmony, cooperation, collaboration. It's about creating in a way that is not based on structure. It's organic. Things grow in a way that are analogous to nature rather than in competition with it. So,
well, was Pisces more in competition with nature?
Pisces was about ruling nature. It's about creating a human order separate from nature. It was about subjugating nature. And the Aquarian age is more about working with nature, taking advantage of those natural processes, biomimicry. There's lots of science, that corresponds to this too. It's you don't have to look very deeply into scientific progress to see the watershed, and that's an important word to use for it, a watershed of new thought and new ideas. Everything from Einstein demonstrating that energy and matter are just mathematically equivalent. They are the same. You can transfer from one to the other with equivalency. To the Wright brothers entering us into a third dimension, almost to the day of the dawning of the Aquarian age in 1903. The Wright brothers flew for the first time in the unimagined history of humanity. This was considered impossible. I mean, the majority of the thought was in a dogma that if man were meant to fly, he'd been born with wings. And yet there were people who were pushing aside those rules, pushing aside that construct, that dogma, and looking for new ways, using everything they had, applying their intellect to a problem, and finding this third dimension now available to be in control of it.
What's after the Aquarian age?
Help me out here. What is after the Aquarian age? I wasn't thinking I'd have to worry about it for another 1900 years or so.
Well, the reason I asked.
I don't know my astrology well enough.
What's the goat? Capricorn.
Taurus.
No,
Taurus was
on
the
other
previous
side
one.
before.
It goes backwards.
Taurus is with Cancer.
It goes backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are going.
Aquarius is
we're
going to
going
be
left to right.
Capricorn.
Capricorn. Yes, Capricorn.
Capricorn.
That's the end of the
That's-
year. Christmas is Capricorn,
Yeah,
right?
Capricorn.
So it'll be the
That's goat,
Capricornian
or the,
age.
crocodile. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know the characteristics of that age?
Solitary.
Solitary, stable. It's the goat. You cannot knock their feet out from under them. They can cling to the side of a mountain and be stable.
You know what she says, right? That we are going to become self-sufficient, steadfast, strong individuals doing this work for the Brotherhood of Men. That's the ideal. That now we're in cooperation with one another, but we're going to grow out of that, not out of the cooperation, but the individuality that comes out of that is self-sufficient, strong, with indomitable willpower to carry through. That's what they're looking for, men and women. And that slowly, actually, we're going to go back to androgeneity as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, the characteristics of the Piscean age, they are both positive and negative. The ability to operate within a structure this rule set. This is what this talk has been about, and that provides the ability to be creative. It is a liberating force, not a constricting force. But it has evolved to the point at the end of the cycle where we've worn out that lesson and we've gotten into a dogmatic position where we adhere to that structure. Our lower nature clings to it because it has always provided us comfort and safety. And the Aquarian age represents being on the edge, being forward thinking, being Promethean, being out there in a way that we're not on stable ground. It's a leap of faith in a way. So 2,000 years from now, when we're at the end of the Aquarian age, we'll be looking back and saying negative things about the Aquarian age. We'll be saying that it was a time where, I don't even know what it'll be, where things were too non-rule based. Things were too loose. Things were there was a constant tendency to regenerate and change was just happening too much. So the Capricornian age then, given the nature of that, as was said, will stabilize those things.
Look it on your iPad that Capricorn is the right one.
It is.
Sorry?
Capricorn I have down.
It is Sunshine. I know. Yeah, my dad's a Capricorn, so and it goes backwards.
I want to make sure that I don't lead anybody wrong.
No, I remember now.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, a little past our time, but yeah.
Some things came to my mind. It seems like we have a tendency we're moving toward the Aquarian age. It seems like we're far from there yet.
We're in it.
But we are in it, but we're in the beginning of it.
Right, it's in its infancy.
So is that an indicator, for example, this student hears people, for example, ministers or something. They'll get up there and they're talking about almost pure laws of nature. I mean, if I didn't know better, I'd think, well, I'm in a Theosophy setting here. And then all of a sudden they twist it around, and whatever dogma they're trying to promote, that supports their dogma.
Sure.
Now, is that how does that help us with progress? I mean, what's
well,
what did we get out of that?
If you turn it off just before they go to the dogma part, yes. I think you've characterized it well. The Aquarian age is in its infancy, so we are going to see a mix of influences. But what will, and yes, it is beneficial because the Piscean dogma no longer has the energy of the universe behind it. It no longer has the sidereal power behind it, right? It's a shadow. It's a legacy. It's a holdover. Whereas all of that, forces of nature stuff that you're hearing that sounds, resonant with the Aquarian age, that's gaining momentum from the sidereal cycle. I mean, that's.
So we've gotten away from hellfire and brimstone.
Well, yeah. I mean, the hellfire and brimstone is no longer sustainable in the current environment, the current, astrological environment. So it'll still be put out there, but it'll eventually become just wearisome. It won't resonate with anyone, and people will stop listening, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's already
Absolutely. Oh, no question. No question.
Is that off now?
Shall we end it?
Yeah.
Speaker?
Sure, yes. Thank you very much, everyone.